One moment he was a hero saving a damsel in distress in the real world, and the next he was sent to another world by the villains. What's more absurd is that when Cain opened his eyes, he was greeted with a face attack from a beautiful mother. He was shocked when he looked at himself in the mirror. He had been reincarnated. Although he didn't come back to life, he was happy to have saved 2 innocent girls. He eagerly looked down at his crotch, only to be caught by a maid who thought Cain had wet the bed. After changing his diaper, he learned about his new situation. His name was Cain, and he was 3 years old. His parents were alive, and he had an older sister, Reina, who was 2 years older. However, since his mother was a concubine, he also had a stepmother and 2 older half-brothers, making Cain the 3rd son of his father, a high-ranking noble and a border count with a personal army. His father's duty was to prevent foreign invasions and oversee a magical forest in the southern part of their territory, where adventurers would hunt monsters using both swords and magic. Hearing about magic, Cain was eager to try it out, but was immediately restrained by the maid who told him to start by learning to read and write. This piqued Cain's interest in this world even more. In his previous life, his only relative had passed away, leaving him with no attachments. He just wanted to study magic, but his parents stifled his ambitions, saying he couldn't use magic until after his baptism at age 5. Frustrated, Cain decided to try it out in his room. To his surprise, a flame several meters long shot out from his hand, burning the ceiling. Panicked, Cain quickly directed the flame out the window, but his sister Reina saw him. Fortunately, she thought he was just exploring the outside world and didn't realize he was secretly practicing magic. From then on, Reina started teaching him the history of their country. The first king had established the country as an adventurer. Additionally, this world had elves, dwarves, beastmen, and other races, including furry beasts, which excited Cain. He couldn't wait to explore the outside world. Time flew by, and the family got into a carriage to go to the baptismal church. Cain was especially excited to see the other world, and his sister told him that after the baptism, he would get a status screen. At the church, the archbishop performed a series of rituals, and holy light shone, transporting the boys to the world of the gods. These gods knew about his past life. An old man with a beard in the center revealed himself to be the creator god and wanted to talk to Cain about his reincarnation. The god of death mentioned that Cain's death was not planned, meaning that even if Cain hadn't intervened to save the 2 girls, the villains would have stumbled and been subdued by bystanders, making Cain's death in vain. Cain cried bitterly. The heinous villain who caused Cain's death was convicted of murder. However, since Cain died while doing a good deed, the gods of Earth entrusted these gods to reincarnate him here. Despite the mental anguish from breastfeeding and diaper changes, he was relieved now that his memories were unlocked. The boy felt grateful for this opportunity, having learned much in advance. Hearing that Cain was studying magic, the gods of magic blessed him, making Cain the chosen one. The archbishop outside was stunned. No one had ever received the favor of all the gods. After coming out, Cain's father wanted to check his status screen, but Cain quickly used a stomachache as an excuse to run to a corner and open his attributes. He discovered that the so-called divine blessings maxed out all his attribute points, even granting him abilities unknown to this world, such as the skill to create magic. Cain promptly hid his overpowered attributes. Revealing them would be disastrous. Back home, his parents were shocked by his status screen. Although Cain had concealed part of it, a small portion of his extraordinary attributes remained unchanged. His father immediately ordered everyone to keep it a secret. In his room, Cain got hold of a magic summoning book. He wanted to summon a furry pet while his sister wasn't around, but ended up summoning a minotaur. Unfortunately, his sister was nearby. To protect her, Cain rushed forward, just as he had in his past life to protect the 2 girls. At the critical moment, Cain used a teleportation spell to send the minotaur away. Seeing the 2 little girls in tears, Cain felt his death was not in vain. However, when he opened his eyes again, he was perfectly fine. Rain hurried to tell their father, but Cain grabbed her hand, believing it was something he should do himself. He wanted to help more people in this world. The next day, Cain held a press conference with his family. Receiving his baptism in front of everyone, Cain expressed his desire to travel the world, meet new people, and become an adventurer to protect everyone's smiles. On this day, his father decided to hire a tutor for him. Cain fantasized in his room about whether his tutor would be a monster or a witch. The next moment, he teleported onto a beautiful woman's lap. Through the butler's introduction, he learned that these two beauties were his tutors. Cain introduced himself, but the tutors didn't know he was a reincarnated noble with maxed out abilities blessed by the gods. Thus, Cain was entrusted to Millie and Nina. The first lesson was swordsmanship. Cain's sword speed left Millie stunned. Even with a wooden sword, their match was evenly matched, which insulted Millie's pride. She then handed him over to the magician Nina. However, Cain's magic demonstration left Nina dumbfounded. Cain humbly said it was just beginner-level magic, not very powerful. This plunged Nina into deep self-doubt. Even the highest-level magicians couldn't match him, let alone Cain, who possessed all elemental magic. How could she cope with that? After inquiring, the two learned that Cain had received blessings from both the god of magic and the god of war. The next second, Cain took out a towel from his spatial storage to wipe their sweat, shocking them once again. A 5-year-old possessing a spatial storage item was unheard of. After discussing, Millie and Nina decided that studying here was not suitable. Coincidentally, Cain wanted to see the outside world, but they first needed to convince Cain's father. Despite Cain being only 5 years old, his skills in swordsmanship and magic far exceeded beginner levels, astonishing even his father. Reluctantly, he agreed to their request for outdoor lessons, but insisted they return before sunset. Cain followed his two beautiful teachers to a vast grassland. Millie asked Cain to try using intermediate magic to attack a rock, but Cain unleashed an advanced level magic, blowing both teachers away. When they got up, they saw half the grassland was gone. At that moment, a rabbit rushed towards Cain, practically offering itself. Cain used a skill to send the little rabbit back to its den. Both teachers thought Cain could hunt some weak monsters. Nina used a detection spell to locate nearby rabbits. Cain glanced at Nina and learned the detection spell himself, with an even broader range. The poor little rabbits were then slaughtered by Cain. Just as he was about to chase a fleeing rabbit, Millie stopped him, saying it was a dangerous forest filled with high-level monsters, which emerge every 10 years to attack towns. Millie hoped Cain would grow into a strong protector of the townspeople. What they didn't know was that this was already a trivial task for Cain. When they returned home, Cain was stunned. Despite only defeating a few rabbits, his level had jumped to 8. Opening his status screen, he discovered he had the title Apostle of the Gods, which boosted his growth rate by 100 times. Those gods had indeed given him something extraordinary. If such an ability were discovered by the kingdom, he would likely be kept under surveillance. The next day during training, Millie needed to visit the Adventurers Guild for monster intel. After inquiring, they found no useful information about monsters. However, a thug approached Millie and Nina, demanding they accompany him for drinks. Nina, not wanting trouble, refused outright, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. Just as he was about to assault Millie and Nina, Cain stopped him with his small hand. The thug, refusing to be thwarted by a child, tried to attack, only to be swiftly knocked down by Cain. Unwilling to give up, he drew a knife and charged at Cain, who dodged every strike. Eventually, Cain disarmed him with a 2-finger technique, leaving the thug dumbfounded, and then kicked him away. His 2 accomplices tried to threaten Cain, but were also promptly kicked out. It was just their bad luck to encounter Cain. After another period of training, Cain had grown into a teenager. The 2 teachers felt they had nothing more to teach him, and decided not to continue as his tutors. Cain, wanting to repay them, remembered that Millie had once mentioned wanting a magic bag. He set off alone into the dangerous forest to gather materials. A pillar of fire shot up into the sky as Cain slaughtered a high-level monster. The soldiers in the distance thought a beast was attacking and quickly sounded the alarm. Cain's father, the Earl, immediately led his troops out, but they only found a large crater with no trace of the monster. However, when he saw a piece of clothing, his jaw dropped in shock. On the last day of teaching, the 2 teachers were preparing to leave. Cain then took out a magic bag he had made himself. The materials were from a bloodthirsty ogre and an earth dragon, which terrified the 2 teachers. These monsters could only be barely defeated by an A-rank adventurer team, but Cain, at just 8 years old, could defeat them alone. The magic bag could even hold an entire estate, astounding the teachers once again. There was no doubt that the magic bag was of national treasure level. Carrying such a national treasure around would surely attract unwanted attention. Cain reassured them not to worry. Anyone who obtained it would have to bear the weight of the items inside. This surpassed even the level of a national treasure. The teachers felt the gift was too valuable, but Cain said that what they taught him was worth much more. Consequently, the two beautiful teachers gave Cain kisses, making his little face blush bright red. And so, the contract between Cain and his two beautiful teachers came to an end. At this time, Cain had already turned 10 years old. His father wanted to take him out to broaden his horizons. Unexpectedly, during one of Cain's detection spells, he found out that people were under attack 3 kilometers away. The Earl immediately ordered the soldiers to go in support, but Cain felt the soldiers would be too late. So, he no longer hid his strength and disappeared like the wind before everyone's eyes. The distant convoy was already in grave danger, with only a few soldiers left being beaten by a group of orcs. But when Cain arrived with the aura of a protagonist, he quickly dealt with a bunch of orcs, even slaying the powerful orc leader with a single strike. He then used a large-scale healing spell on the injured soldiers and collected the bodies of the fallen into a storage box. By the time Cain's father arrived, the battle was already over. However, when he saw the emblem on the carriage, he realized it was the Duke's convoy. As the carriage door slowly opened, 2 beautiful girls around Cain's age appeared. Telestia, due to her fright, couldn't stand steadily. Cain used a calming spell, which completely restored Telestia. With just one spell, Cain captured the hearts of Princess Telestia and Lady Silk, and then he was dragged onto the carriage and taken away. Even Cain's father was surprised, wondering if young girls were this aggressive now. Cain just wanted to change seats but was held by Telestia, who said she was scared and needed Cain to stay by her side. Next came the double assault, and as a virgin, Cain couldn't handle it. The 2 girls even wanted Cain to spend the night with them for protection. Although Cain's father found it inappropriate, he ultimately yielded to the authority of the 2 girls. In the end, Cain had no choice but to agree, but he requested a large room with well-spaced beds. His father reminded him to maintain his virtue, but an unexpected event happened quickly. After arriving at the room, they actually found 3 beds. Since both girls wanted to sleep next to Cain, he had no choice but to sleep in the middle. Unexpectedly, Silk tried to push her bed closer, and Telestia was not to be outdone. Cain started to feel scared. The 2 girls got closer and closer. Who knows if Cain could maintain his bottom line tonight? As a result, the next day he ended up with dark circles under his eyes. Not only that, but for the next few days, Cain had to sleep with the 2 girls every night. Fortunately, they finally arrived at the royal capital. The first thing they did was take him to see the king. Cain was granted the title of Baron and was given 10 white gold coins and an estate. However, a few crafty scoundrel among the ministers felt it was inappropriate to confer a title on a 10-year-old child and raised objections to the king. But the king overruled them with a single vote, forcing the crafty scoundrel to retreat sweating. Unexpectedly, after the meeting, the king wanted to meet Cain in the reception room. First, he thanked Cain for saving his daughter, and then revealed his ultimate purpose. My Telestia and the Duke's Silk, would you be willing to marry them? Cain was stunned. The king and the Duke then explained that since Cain held their hands in the carriage and slept with unmarried women, they couldn't marry anyone else. Cain had no choice but to agree to this ridiculous engagement under the witness of the king and the Duke. The 2 girls happily expressed that they couldn't forget the days spent closely together and that night. That night? Days spent closely together? These words deeply misunderstood the king. Cain felt that he might have become too powerful, so he wanted to discuss a solution with the gods. Unexpectedly, the white-bearded king of the gods said that Cain's current abilities could make him a demigod, but there are limits to what one person can achieve. He advised Cain not to push himself too hard. Then he mentioned that the gods were bored and wanted Cain to use his knowledge from his previous life to create some entertainment products. Cain smelled a business opportunity and agreed to the gods' request. Upon returning to the land, he found a chamber of commerce and planned to create world-famous entertainment products. After presenting his proposal, the president realized it was for an unheard-of board game. After Cain left a gold coin, the president agreed to produce it. The power of money indeed worked. When Cain returned to the Chamber of Commerce a few days later, the board game had been made. After playing many rounds with the president felt this thing could definitely sell well. Cain planned to make 2 versions of the board game, one for ordinary people and one for nobles. But the Chamber of Commerce had limited cash flow, and the president found it difficult to speak up. Cain took out a few more gold coins, and they signed an agreement. Under the witness of the god of commerce, the board game was also sent to the gods as an offering. After completing the contract, Cain asked for a deluxe version of the board game to try to win his father-in-law's favor. Hearing that it was a tribute to the royal family, the president was flattered and promised to make it well. After Cain returned, the debut event in the royal capital was about to begin. As soon as he stepped out of the banquet hall, he saw the Duke and her daughter. His prospective father-in-law also showed a meaningful smile, which scared Cain into not daring to speak recklessly. But seeing his prospective fiancée dressed so beautifully and sweet-talking to win Silk's favor, the two almost kissed in the banquet hall. Fortunately, the host of the banquet, the king, arrived on the scene and stopped the actions of the 2 children. After a speech, the king also met Cain. Seeing Telestia, Cain's praise made Telestia blush. Even the king couldn't help but complain to Cain's father, "How did you raise such a playboy?" Seeing the king's gnashing expression, the boy was also afraid and directly took out the board game as a tribute. After explaining its use, the king seemed very interested, but it didn't stop him from wanting to have a good talk with Cain. So after the banquet, he wanted to meet with Cain again. Cain's parents went to socialize, leaving Cain alone. At this time, Silk came over to cling to Cain. Just as they were flirting, the son of the old fox came over with 2 lackeys, fantasizing that Silk would like him, and preparing to go out and duel with Cain. Unexpectedly, Silk hugged Cain directly in front of the 3 of them. Habit was very angry and said that his 2 lackeys had also received the blessings of the gods. This action scared Silk into clinging to Cain even more tightly. Then, the boy's series of moves even changed the color of the sky. A burst of divine power erupted, followed by a fireball spell, but Cain dodged it effortlessly. Fortunately, Silk explained Cain's identity and heroic deeds, successfully scaring off the 3 kids. Just as Silk proposed secretly dating Cain, Telestia discovered them. Under Telestia's questioning, she also proposed dating Cain. At only 10 years old, the boy owned assets worth billions and was even granted an estate by the king, originally intended for breeding heirs with his fiancées. But Cain directly summoned 4 little maids and a handsome butler. However, upon hearing that the butler's name was Colin, Cain immediately became uneasy, thinking there might be a murder case tonight. He then casually placed a red dragon specimen in the hall to ward off evil spirits. The little maids were so scared that their souls almost flew out, and even his father was curious about what Cain had done. It turned out that when Cain went to the forest earlier, he had killed this little dragon. A red dragon is a calamity-level monster, requiring the sacrifice of an A-rank adventurer to barely defeat. But considering his son's extraordinary abilities, it wasn't too surprising. However, the red dragon specimen was worth 1,000 white gold coins, meaning this little dragon was worth 10 billion. Not to mention the specimens Cain hadn't released yet. Just this little dragon alone was enough for Cain to live off comfortably. But the surprises didn't stop there. After using the bathroom, Cain's mother felt an exhilarating sensation, which scared his father so much that he hurriedly brought Cain to the scene. It turned out to be a new washing method, which even startled him. At this moment, his father told Cain something important. A noble with an estate is required by custom to host a debut event. Cain didn't expect that inviting guests would involve so many rules. For example, as a baron, Cain couldn't directly invite the king to the banquet. At most, he could invite someone of the duke's rank. While Cain was troubled about entertaining guests, a little maid suggested an idea. Cain instantly got inspired and used creation magic to make crystal cups as guest gifts. Then he found a chef to make steaks, and even the sparkling wine was Cain's idea. After taking a sip, the little maid was so enchanted that it was clear how many hearts Cain would capture with this move. However, at that moment, the king was very angry because he hadn't received an invitation from Cain. He began to scold Cain, asking why everyone else had received one except his future father-in-law. The king was very upset. Fortunately, Cain had prepared for this and explained that the invitation had to be delivered to His Majesty in person. This made the king happy again. When Cain and the little maids announced that the king would be coming, everyone present was shocked. To think that Cain could invite His Majesty the King, and Cain's fiancées were Telestia and Silk. This news caused the little maids to scream with excitement. When the debut event began, the guests arrived as expected. After Cain's speech, everyone raised their glasses and drank heartily. The sparkling wine and steaks won everyone's hearts. The king also arrived in time with Telestia. After taking a sip of the pure sparkling wine, he was nearly elated. The queen, after using the bathroom, also found it to be incredibly delightful. Upon hearing this, the king immediately wanted to try it out, resulting in him demanding Cain to install it in the royal castle as soon as possible. The last guest to arrive was the crafty scoundrel. Even though he found the sparkling wine delicious, he insisted on criticizing Cain's hospitality and said the steaks weren't good either. But when he saw the king, he immediately knelt down. After a scolding from the king, he crawled out of Cain's estate on his knees. However, the king didn't realize that Cain had used him, which ended up making the king angry again. It seemed that Cain's good days were over. One day, Cain wanted to find a room to store monsters, but the room the vice captain found was too small to fit them. So, he took Cain to the training ground. When the spatial item in Cain's hand slowly opened, giant monsters appeared before the vice captain, leaving him stunned. How could a 10-year-old kid be so powerful? Could he be a hero or a divine apostle? Hearing divine apostle, Cain almost exposed himself. Just as he was about to find an excuse to escape, the vice captain grabbed him, saying he would take him to spar with the knights and meet their captain. When they arrived at the knights' quarters, the members questioned whether this kid was really worth everyone attacking together. Cain, however, defeated them all with a single move. At that moment, an elf descended from the sky. Discovering that Cain was the hero who exterminated the orcs, she insisted on fighting him. Everyone was astonished that Cain could fight the captain on equal footing. To end this farce quickly, Cain accelerated and defeated the captain. Thus, the elf captain knelt and proposed to him, unaware that Cain already had 2 fiancées. As the captain of the National Knight Order, such a marriage matter had to be approved by the king. Before Cain could struggle, he was dragged away by the captain to meet the king, with his father by his side. When the captain announced her intention to marry Cain, both were surprised. Was Cain that charming? Even the National Knight Order's captain wanted to marry him. They quickly asked Cain what had happened. As Cain explained the situation, the king told the captain that Cain was already betrothed to Telestia and Silk. Surprisingly, she still insisted on marrying Cain, which gave the king a headache. He reluctantly said that she could proceed if she got her father's permission. Then, Cain was dragged away again. When the vice captain saw Cain again, he found him nearly drained. It turned out that since that day, the captain had been engaging in deep conversations with Cain daily until he was exhausted. Just as he was explaining, they heard the captain's call, scaring Cain into trying to escape, but he was dragged away by the vice captain, who said the king wanted to see him. The king gave Cain a book passed down through generations of imperial-level magicians, but no one could understand it. When Cain opened it, he found it written in Japanese. Unable to hide his identity any longer, Cain revealed that he was a reincarnated person, coming from the same country as the first king, and had seen the gods during his baptism. The king was shocked. Cain's father suggested checking Cain's status panel. When the true panel was revealed, everyone was amazed by his abilities. However, Cain just wanted to live an ordinary life. The helpless king agreed, but suggested that Cain become the king. Just then, the captain rushed in, announcing she had obtained her father's marriage permit and dragged Cain away, leaving the 5 people in bewilderment, unsure of what would happen next. Today was his 12th birthday, also the day he could officially register as an adventurer. After filling out his information at the guild, he received his guild information card. Although he was rated as C rank, Cain still felt optimistic about the future. While chatting with the receptionist, 3 burly men tried to hit on her. Before he could intervene, they were saved by a handsome red-haired man named Claude. Grateful, Cain had a drink with him. Cain learned that Claude was an A-rank adventurer, and that the first king was SSS rank. Excited to learn more about adventurers, Cain was stunned when Claude was suddenly taken away by his wife. Cain then set off to find a suitable quest for himself. He received a goblin subjugation mission, with bonuses calculated based on the number defeated. Just as he stepped out, he encountered his captain wife, who insisted on accompanying him, treating the mission as a date. "Husband, come chase me," she teased. Fortunately, Cain didn't forget his primary objective. Using his detection magic, he located the goblins' hideout. Upon arrival, they found that some people had already been injured. The two of them immediately teleported to treat the innocent civilians. The beautiful captain's prowess was evident as she effortlessly dealt with the small goblins. However, as soon as one group was defeated, another appeared. Cain cast a reinforcement spell on the beautiful captain. With Cain's assistance, even the strongest goblin leader was taken down with a single strike from her. Unexpectedly, a swarm of small lizards emerged from behind. Cain told the captain to take the civilians and leave while he stayed behind to handle the lizards. Back at the guild, when Cain tried to exchange his loot, a small supervisor doubted him. The supervisor couldn't believe that a 10-year-old novice adventurer could defeat so many lizards in one day. It wasn't until the guild master arrived and explained Cain's identity that the supervisor was scared half to death. Then, the beautiful captain entered, declaring Cain as her husband, and revealed that the guild master was her brother, which made the supervisor drop to his knees, apologizing profusely to Cain. After the supervisor left, the guild master, impressed by Cain's achievements, promoted him to A rank. Meanwhile, the gods were secretly observing Cain, wondering if they had given him too much power. However, the elderly god king said it was good for Cain to grow stronger because a demon was about to awaken again. Though Cain was only 12 and needed to attend school for systematic learning, he teleported directly to the school gate to avoid being late, much to his mother's relief. This boy, capable of world-destroying power, was now taking an entrance exam for elementary school. Cain completed all the questions in 20 minutes, astonishing the examiners. His demonstration of a basic spell left everyone in awe. During the practical test, he encountered his acquaintance, Claude, and fought him evenly, leaving the other children bewildered. Cain's performance caught the king's attention again. After questioning Cain, the king discovered that Cain had gone to the wrong exam site. Frustrated, the king scolded Cain for causing such a commotion. No wonder Celestia and Silk couldn't find him. Nevertheless, Cain successfully passed the entrance exam and ranked first. When he went to register, he found his sister in charge of the process. Upon seeing Cain, she rushed over and spun him around in a hug. On the first day of school, Cain's uniformed appearance stunned everyone. As the top scorer, Cain gave a speech, and after his address, the king arrived, openly expressing his admiration for Cain's talents. During their first class, Celestia and Silk chose 2 subjects that would help them support Cain in the future. After class, Cain had just left the classroom when he noticed his sister's friend being targeted by Habit and his 2 companions. Cain immediately stepped in, causing Habit and his friends to kneel and apologize. It must be said, Cain's ability to act cool was becoming more impressive. However, as the 3 girls chatted, a voice appeared in Cain's mind, summoning him to the library. Once Cain arrived and opened the door, he was instantly transported to a secluded mansion. Inside, he found the owner leisurely brewing coffee. While Cain marveled at the presence of coffee in this world, the mansion's owner revealed Cain's past life name, Kazuya Shiina. This poor child, only 12 years old, was tasked with saving the world, and his opponent was Eren, one of the former 7 pillar gods. Fortunately, the gods had found him a powerful mentor, Yuya, who was also from Japan. But upon hearing the name, Cain was stunned. Wasn't that the name of the first king? It had been over 300 years, so his mentor must be a ghost. Yuya laughed and told Cain to use his appraisal skill. After seeing Yuya's status panel, Cain realized that his mentor had become a creator god, the ruler of this world, maintaining his appearance for over 300 years. Yuya then delivered some bad news. The evil god Eren was about to re-emerge. 300 years ago, Yuya had sealed him away, but the seal was weakening. As a creator god, Yuya, like the other god kings, couldn't directly intervene in this world, so he handed this challenge to Cain. Before Cain could respond, Yuya teleported him to the ocean and handed him a sword, explaining that Cain's current power was only average in this world. To defeat Eren, he needed to reach level 600. Yuya instructed Cain to travel through the forest to the mansion he had just left without using teleportation magic. Reluctantly, Cain began his journey on foot, encountering numerous powerful beasts along the way. all of which he managed to defeat. Meanwhile, Telestia and Silk arrived at Cain's home, concerned after not finding him for several days. The maid informed them that Cain hadn't returned for a while. Telestia, however, wasn't worried, confident in the hero who had saved them. On the other side, Cain was exhausted. He hadn't slept in months since his training began, steadily heading toward the mansion. Along the way, he found an injured little fox. He used a healing spell on the fox and then fainted. During his unconscious state, the little fox protected Cain. Upon waking and seeing this, Cain gained his first companion in this world. Together, they continued their training. After an unknown amount of time, Cain finally reached the familiar mansion, and 4 years had passed in the training world, while only 4 days had elapsed in the original world. After seeing the little fox, Yuya remarked that Cain was indeed lucky, as the little fox belonged to a divine beast species. With Yuya's help, the fox and Cain formed a contract. Yuya then introduced a new mentor to Cain, who immediately gave him a tough challenge. This marked the beginning of daily rigorous training, during which Cain was repeatedly knocked down. Cain remembered what Yuya had told him. Eren was originally one of the gods, but was exiled for abusing his power to initiate deadly games across the world. If Eren were to revive, these death games would recommence. To protect those he cared about, Cain had to become stronger. Yuya also revealed that the ones he couldn't protect were Cain's biological parents. After their car accident, they disappeared and, like Cain, were reincarnated into this world. Blessed by the gods, they became heroes and joined the battle against Eren. Although they managed to seal Eren, Cain's parents perished in the battle. Determined to protect his loved ones, Cain's resolve reached its peak. He then broke through his limits and successfully defeated his mentor with a single strike, finally reuniting with his parents. Kneeling, he apologized to them and thanked Yuya. With a gentle spell, Yuya restored Cain to his former self. Cain then formed contracts with 2 divine beasts and prepared to return to his original world. Yuya also entrusted Cain with something to deliver to the king. Upon returning home, the 3 girls rushed towards Cain, holding cookies they had baked for him. Unable to hold back his tears, Cain cried while devouring the cookies. With such devoted wives, what more could a husband ask for? Just as Cain returned from his training, he received bad news. The Adventurers Guild needed him to accept a commission. Since becoming an A-rank adventurer, Cain hadn't taken any missions, and his information risked being deleted. He hurried to the Adventurers Guild to demand an explanation from the guildmaster. After being told that his information would be deleted if he didn't accept a commission, Cain quickly took on a mission and teleported to its vicinity. He discovered a group of small-time thieves targeting his beautiful former teacher. Cain immediately flew over and healed his teacher. The thieves, seeing this, taunted Cain, who swiftly defeated them, then tied them up tightly. His teacher was surprised because dealing with thieves required at least a C-rank adventurer. When Cain showed her his A-rank adventurer license, she was delighted. After returning to town to submit the mission, Cain learned that he had been made a baron. Unexpectedly, the same thugs from before came to harass his teacher again. The next moment, they encountered Cain, who scared them into retreating instantly. At that moment, Claude arrived just in time, and the thugs took the opportunity to flee. To Cain's surprise, his beautiful mentor turned out to be Claude's sister. So, they all had a meal together. Claude's wife, upon learning that Cain could make magical pouches, used her charms to persuade him into making one for her as well. Cain agreed, but suddenly remembered he had school the next day and decided to slip away. The next day in class, to his surprise, 4 people were secretly observing Cain. They were the instructors hired by the academy this time. Without much ado, they began training the students. But Cain was isolated. What Cain didn't know was that the 4 instructors wanted to duel him to a draw and then make him the class hero, helping him integrate well into the class. However, when Cain's turn came, the class bell rang, making him very angry. That night, he charged into the forest to slay monsters, but others mistook it for the Demon King's arrival. The military was quickly dispatched, only to find a large crater at the scene. Meanwhile, in a nearby cave, a black dragon was slowly awakening. The evil god Eren, one of the former 7 pillar gods. During class, while other children summoned small animals, Cain directly summoned the Demon King. Unexpectedly, the Demon King, who looked mighty and imposing, was willing to become Cain's subordinate. However, due to the large audience, Cain couldn't agree to this openly, so he sent the Demon King back to his world. Before leaving, the Demon King stated that if Cain wanted to destroy this world, the demon tribe would fully support him. Everyone wondered if Cain had indeed summoned the Demon King, but he managed to brush it off. The news eventually reached the king, and Cain had to explain that he had formed a contract with the Demon King. Faced with the king's concern that the Demon King might destroy the kingdom, Cain had to repeatedly assure him that this would not happen. People were curious about how much magic power Cain had to summon the Demon King, so Cain opened his status panel, revealing that he had become a demigod with immeasurable power. This frightened everyone. To reward him, the king bestowed the title of Viscount upon Cain and assigned him to manage a territory, reasoning that someone who couldn't protect a town couldn't protect a country. Thus, Cain returned home to discuss the management of the territory with his maid. Coincidentally, the butler brought news of a monster outbreak in the Forest of Beasts. Cain hurried back to understand the situation from his brother. Upon learning that the recent monster surge in the Forest of Beasts had caused the deaths of many adventurers, Cain teleported to the forest to investigate. While searching, he constantly felt someone watching him from the shadows. So, Cain decided to summon the Demon King for assistance. At this moment, the Demon King also sensed a powerful presence in the forest. Cain asked him to investigate more thoroughly. The Demon King then summoned his butler, known for his excellent scouting abilities, who immediately began his investigation. Suddenly, numerous S-level monsters appeared around them, all of which Cain dispatched with a single sword strike. Planning to return and report the findings, Cain left the area to the Demon King and his butler for further exploration. When Cain returned to the Adventurers Guild, Claude and his wife arrived as well. Everyone was stunned upon seeing the monsters Cain had slain. If these monsters had attacked the town, the consequences would have been disastrous. Meanwhile, as the two continued to delve deeper, they realized something was increasingly amiss. In the cave, Aaron also sensed the danger, causing all the surrounding monsters to go berserk. The Demon King quickly used teleportation magic to report the situation to Cain. Upon hearing the news, Cain wanted to rush to suppress the threat immediately. Unexpectedly, his leader and wife appeared, intending to join him on the front lines. However, Cain asked her to guard the town instead. After Cain eliminated a wave of monsters, the two also discovered the source of the monster uprising, the evil god Aaron, one of the 7 pillar gods. Just moments ago, the Demon King had been fighting monsters in the forest with Cain, but without addressing the root cause, the monster attacks could not be stopped. So, the Demon King prepared to summon his subordinates for help, instructing Cain to face Aaron alone. To Cain's surprise, only 4 subordinates appeared when the Demon King waved his hand. Cain had expected thousands of demon troops, but this proved the Demon King's capabilities were lacking. The subordinates, known as the 4 heavenly kings of the demon tribe, were curious about why the Demon King had summoned them. However, the appearance of the butler also shocked them. They soon learned that the Demon King was following Cain's request, prompting these subordinates to take action. Meanwhile, as Cain ventured deeper, Aaron appeared before him, having only partially revived and using the body of a black dragon. After a hostile exchange, Aaron continued to summon a monster army. Upon seeing Cain's eyes, he immediately attacked, recognizing that Cain's parents were the ones who had sealed him. Cain launched a counterattack, but the damage to Aaron was minimal. Meanwhile, the 4-person adventurer team also began slaying monsters, but struggled due to their overwhelming numbers. As their magic power was nearly depleted, Cain's leader and wife arrived just in time, saving Claude with a single skill. The knight army she led also arrived silently, prepared to fight to the death to protect the town. At this moment, Cain's battle also reached a fever pitch. He summoned his 2 contracted beasts, but they were immediately knocked down by Aaron's dragon breath. Enraged, Cain charged forward, blocking Aaron's magic and demonstrating his resolve to protect everyone. His entire body radiated a golden light as he engaged in a world-shaking clash with Aaron, a spectacle so bright that even the people in the city witnessed it. Strangely, as Cain fought with his eyes closed, one of his contracted beasts bit his foot. The Demon King and the butler also arrived at the scene. When Cain finally opened his eyes, he realized his attack had nearly destroyed the entire forest. To his surprise, Aaron was completely annihilated. With the monster army defeated, Cain reunited with his companions. After some time, when Cain returned to the royal capital, he was scolded by the king, who was also shocked by Cain's actions. However, the king rewarded him for defending the kingdom by granting him a large territory. Cain then planned to set off for his new domain with his harem, and life became increasingly prosperous. But unexpectedly, the Demon King appeared seeking Cain's help, having been caught cheating by his wife. Cain, surrounded by his 3 women, sided with the Demon King's wife, reasoning that unfaithful men are unreliable. After all, a truly capable man would openly maintain a harem.